Just as I was preparing to leave for my son's dinner, my phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. "Call me immediately." The subsequent conversation left me utterly stunned about my own son. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. If I lose today, I will lose my granddaughter to the cold and to a man who calls malice a curriculum. The thought was an anchor chain around my heart, heavy and cold. It wasn't just money at stake now. It was the architecture of a child's soul. And the man threatening to tear it down was my son. I felt the familiar, low-burning anger, not the explosive kind, but the structural rage an engineer feels when a foundation he built shifts and cracks under willful negligence. I breathed in, forcing myself to remember the simple, hard-won forgiveness I had granted Adam 1,000 times before. Forgiveness for his weakness, never for his cruelty. The front door of my meticulously maintained brownstone shattered the evening's quiet, like a poorly struck gong when Adam hit it with his shoulder, a familiar, childish display of entitled aggression. The heavy, antique brass knob turned with a groan of protest, and then Adam was inside, his breath sharp and shallow in the controlled air of my foyer, his expensive, slightly rumpled suit hanging on him the way desperation wrinkles a man, regardless of the tailoring. "Dad, we are absolutely past the pleasantries," he declared, marching across the vintage Persian rug, a gift from my late wife, Lillian, now just a bridge he owned and intended to burn. "You are liquidating this asset and cutting me in now. I need the capital, and you don't." He didn't spare a glance for the framed architectural renderings lining the hallway, the photos of Lillian smiling under the high vaulted ceiling, or the parquet floor I'd restored myself 2 years ago. He looked only at me, at the worn leather chair where I sat, at the mahogany end table, the reading lamp, the entire collected bank of my 65 years, the newspaper I'd been annotating, a feature on sustainable urban planning, slid from my knee and onto the carpet. I stood, slowly, deliberately, because I will always stand in my own house, a fortress I designed and built against the chaotic whims of the outside world, including him. "You are upset, Adam," I said, my voice low, steady, and resonant, like the deep chime of the clock in the hall. "Your emotions are currently running too hot for this conversation. A cup of coffee helps a man think." "Keep the coffee," he spat, the sound hard and metallic, like a nickel tossed with contempt at a beggar. "You're 65, Dad, a retired structural engineer with a pension. What do you realistically need all this for? I have bills, real bills, and temperance." He stopped, realizing he had deployed the name of my granddaughter, the one word that could truly sell me the rest of the way, and then leaned on it, twisting the word into a tool. "My girl needs structure, and I intend to provide it." "Structure?" I repeated, the word tasting like rust on my tongue. My hands found the high, carved back of the chair, my fingertips tracing the fluted column, gripping it to keep them from betraying the deep tremor that wanted to start. I was furious, yes, but my anger was cold and functional. Is that why she wears the same threadbare jacket every time I see her? Why her young lips go gray and cracked in November? Is the cold part of your architectural plan for her structure, Adam? Adam's jaw worked, the muscle ticking furiously under his pale skin. He scanned the mantel, finally landing on the small, silver-framed photograph of Tempe from her 6th birthday, a little astronomer with a cardboard telescope and a grin too large for her face, eyes shining with the simple wonder I had fought my whole life to preserve. "You think I don't provide?" he challenged, the volume rising. "You think you could do better with your pension and your ridiculous crosswords?" He gestured wildly, and the cuff of his sleeve caught the shade of the brass reading lamp. It wobbled precariously. I reached out, my fingers arresting the lamp's fall with the practiced dexterity of a man who once corrected load-bearing imbalances 20 stories up. I steadied the fixture, and then I set down what little gentleness I had left in the room. "Get out," I commanded. He blinked, the command having caught him off guard. He had expected bargaining, maybe a sentimental speech about family duty. He had expected me, Elias Vance, to crumble and forgive this latest transgression immediately, as I had the countless failures before. "You don't mean that," he scoffed, recovering his arrogance. "I mean it all the way to the curb," I stated, the tip of my index finger pointing to the door with the unwavering authority of a man who spent a lifetime measuring the tensile strength of steel and the tolerances of concrete. "This house is not a bank you rob when your own funds run low. And you are not short, Adam. You are simply greedy." His mouth went mean and thin, and a shadow of something ugly, something I had never intended to father, crossed his face. "You'll regret this when you're drooling in some facility. Don't call me." An answer of my own was perched on my tongue, a sharp barb about how he hadn't answered my calls in years, unless there was the faint scent of money at the other end. But the truth of my disappointment and my enduring, complicated forgiveness needed fewer words, needed only a simple, final action. I turned my back on him, a symbolic act of severance, and walked to the door, opened it wide, and let the biting November air shoulder its way into the house, symbolically cleansing the space. "You're done for today, Adam." My voice sounded like my father's voice, the deep, unforgiving monotone I swore I'd never use. Funny how time loops back on you, I thought. He left with enough engine noise to set the neighborhood dogs barking in protest. I locked the massive oak door, bolting it against the storm he represented, and stood in the quiet he had blown to pieces. The brownstone still held the familiar, comforting smell of beeswax polish and old, well-loved architectural monographs. Somewhere a few blocks over, an evening train gave its iron-throated complaint. I moved slowly past the photos. Lillian's resolute smile, my own son, Adam, at 7, before the entitlement had hardened his features, and the most recent one, Tempe at 7, cheeks rosy from a brief visit, the knit cap I'd bought her tugged low over her ears. I reached for that frame and gently polished the glass, careful not to pick it up. My hands were not steady enough. I sat in my favorite armchair, the one that remembered every line and contour of my body. The tremor in my fingers began in earnest, drawing a small, frantic zigzag across the page of the newspaper. It would settle in a minute. It always did, but the physical betrayal was a reminder of the stakes. I breathed in, a slow, 4-count inhale, and out, a 6-count exhale, the specific rhythm the cardiologist had taught me. I counted backwards from 50 by 7s until my stubborn heart slowed down and my mind, my most reliable tool, got useful again. There is a point in an old man's day when he knows exactly what kind of long, grueling night he's buying for himself. Mine would be a long one, a fight of principle, a fight for warmth. The phone rang, and I briefly considered letting it go, letting the silence heal the wound Adam had left. The caller ID read Ms. Delacroix's office. My attorney doesn't call to chat. I paid her for results, not pleasantries. "Delacroix," I answered, my voice still slightly ragged. "Elias," she answered. "She'll be the first to tell you I didn't pay her to be formal. Are you okay to talk?" "I am now," I confirmed. "Your son reached out to me this morning. Questions about your will. Hypotheticals about competency." The tone was odd. I don't like it. I closed my eyes and saw the lamp wobble again, The image of Tempe on the mantel, the thin, inadequate jacket she always wore. He just tried to empty my house with his mouth, I thought. I told Ms. Delacroix. Adam said Tempe needs structure. Ms. Delacroix is not a sentimental woman. She's a legal scalpel. But I heard the breath leave her slow. Structure, huh? He is colder to that child than a midwinter front. Elias, I know you carry a lot of complicated forgiveness for him, but this is different. I know, I admitted, my voice dropping, heavy with the weight of my double commitment. If I fail today, I won't just lose assets. I will lose the girl to the cold and the kind of discipline that breaks more than it builds. It's time to stop forgiving the methods and start defending the victim. You want next steps? Ms. Delacroix said. It wasn't a question. It was a transition to the work. I want the girl warm tonight, I insisted, the final goal ringing clear as a bell. And I want paper between me and whatever storm Adam is cooking. I want him to know that my anger is not a whim, but a solid, legal wall he cannot climb. We plotted. Marouane Delacroix would tighten the documents, add language that saw around every possible corner Adam's greed might exploit. No transfers under duress, no sudden amendments without multiple, independent witnesses, no room to argue I didn't know my own name or my own mind. We'd set a meeting for the morning. In the meantime, I would rotate the combination on the fireproof safe, log the serial numbers of the valuable architectural drafts, and lock the upstairs drafting room door, the room where Lillian had once set up her pottery studio and where my crucial files now lived. Simple work, I thought. Work for hands. When we hung up, the house seemed to settle again, affirming my decision. The tall grandfather clock in the hallway gave me 3 measured chimes. The light had shifted. The lace curtains cast a complex, delicate pattern on the polished table, like frostwork. I made a cup of hot water out of stubbornness, then didn't drink it. My stomach was knotted. My hunger refused. I ladled lentil soup from yesterday's pot into a bowl and set it on the gas stove, turned the burner, and watched the clear, blue flame catch. I'd been frugal my whole life, a habit of my profession, but soup for supper felt like a feast of self-care. The burner clicked off. I had turned it off. I stared at the dial. I couldn't remember doing it. The bowl waited, unsteaming. The exhaustion is real. Elias, stay focused, I warned myself. The phone rang again. This time a different name lit the screen. Adam. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times, allowing the silence to make my statement. But then, drawn by the faint, lingering hope that my forgiveness was not entirely misplaced, I answered anyway. Dad, he said softly. The word, curling around my ribs, did its old, manipulative trick. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Look, I'm under a lot of pressure, but that's not your burden. Can we eat tonight? My treat. We'll start fresh. I pictured Tempe's inadequate jacket. I pictured my son's eyes, how they used to meet mine without calculation, before the constant need for money had turned them transactional. The old library bistro, he suggested, picking the place he knew I loved. The old public library, which I had helped redesign into a restaurant, with the massive stained glass windows that make you believe in redemption again, even if you've forgotten the words. 7 o'clock? I looked at the clock. I looked at the bowl of cold soup. I thought of Lillian's faint lavender perfume, the scent of her last year, and how she'd lift my chin and say, "People can surprise you. Elias, Sometimes for the better. Keep the door slightly ajar. Then I remembered Ms. Delacroix's voice, and the word competency hanging in the room like a bad smell. Forgiveness could wait. Security could not. Maybe another night. Adam, I said. He pushed. He was always a pusher, always mistaking inertia for opportunity. Dad, I want to say this in person. Please. Not tonight, I insisted, cutting him off before his plea could breach my resolve. Silence stretched thin, then snapped. You'll regret this, he said. But this time, the words were strangely muted, making it sound less like a threat and more like a defeated, self-pitying prayer. He hung up. I took the soup off the stove, set it on a trivet, and let it be. I wasn't hungry after all. I wasn't anything but tired, but it was the profound, soul-deep exhaustion that sleep doesn't touch. Kinetic actions have a way of lining themselves up, whether you plan for them or not. I had just started upstairs to change the safe combination when a small, insistent knock came from the porch. The kind of tapping that belongs to people who sell cookies or read meters. Mr. Chen, from 2 doors down, stood there holding my mail and a Tupperware container with a bright blue lid. I made too much beef stew, he said, his eyes tracking my face with that gentle, neighborly radar that can catch a lie at 20 feet. You look like you didn't make enough. You're a saint, I told him, and meant it, his quiet offering a balm to the raw anger Adam had stirred. He set the container on my kitchen counter and glanced toward the mantel, his gaze resting on Tempe's picture, the little astronomer. I saw the girl last week, he said. Goofy hat, nice manners, good heart. Is she okay? Weather talk is the language of men like me, guarded, practical. Neighbor talk is the language of women like Lillian and men like Mr. Chen. It says more than the words themselves. She's cold, I admitted, nodding toward the window where the November air was gathering. Not just the temperature kind, he confirmed. I've got a spare coat. A good one. My grandson outgrew it. If it fits, it's yours. He said it like an order, a necessary construction detail, then softened it with a rare smile. And don't pay me back by buying all my church raffle tickets next month. You'll only end up with too much stuff in your house. We stood a minute in the silence of people who have survived worse and don't need to name it, united by our shared concern for a small girl. Then he left me to my stew and my list. Upstairs, I reset the safe combination, moved the sensitive documents into the newly secured inner vault, and ensured the lock on the drafting room door was firmly set. Lillian had always teased that I made lists so I could have the simple joy of crossing things off. She wasn't wrong. Ms. Delacroix's list of tasks helped. So did the sound of my own breath, traveling steadily in and out like a well-tuned machine. Around 6, I pulled on my coat and drove the short distance to the drugstore. The plastic bag for my heart medication felt light in my hand when I reached the counter. Total with insurance is $65, the clerk said, smiling warmly. I slid my bank card into the reader. Declined. I tried again, feeling the heat rise in my collar. Declined again. The clerk smiled the way polite people do when a machine wants to be mortifying. Sometimes our machine is fussy. Want to try a different card, sir? I paid in cash, the crisp bills a stark reminder of my independence. I had enough, of course. I always do. But the small, public humiliation of the transaction stuck because it was new, and it felt like a deliberate insult. Back home, I checked the bank app. 2 automatic drafts had hit early, a massive winter bill I'd forgotten, gas and electric bundled. The house costs what it costs to keep warm. And then I saw it. A premature withdrawal, An unauthorized transfer to cover one of Adam's real bills, cutting deeply into my liquid assets. He hadn't just tried to bargain for my money. He had tried to take it. The small, cold fact of the declined card was a tangible consequence of his theft. The betrayal is complete, I thought, the structural anger now hardening into cold, pure resolve. He has mistaken my forgiveness for weakness. At 7:30, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail. Tempe's voice, thin and reedy on the phone, like a reed bent in the wind. "Grandpa, it's me. Daddy says I can't talk long. I'm okay. I've got a consequence. So, I'm sleeping in the laundry shed tonight, but I have a blanket. Anyway, I'm okay." She rushed the last part as if the words could turn cotton into insulation. "Love you, Grandpa." I stood a long time listening to the silence after the beep. Then I listened again and again, hearing the part she was trying to hide. Her teeth chattering, a tiny, frantic rhythm between the "I'm" and the "okay." My hands didn't shake this time. The anger had burned away the tremor, leaving only a clear, functional determination. Claire picked up on the second ring. She didn't say hello. "If you're calling to tell me how to parent," she said, her voice low, flat, and fast, without any emotion, "save it. You lost the right to lecture when you stopped paying for things." "I'm calling to keep a promise I made to that girl the day she was born," I countered, matching her tone with one of even colder authority. "No lectures. Where is she?" "In the laundry shed, like he said. She talks back. She learns. That's how discipline works." "Discipline keeps a child safe while he learns," I corrected her, my voice rising a half note, the only emotional concession I allowed myself. "Punishment hurts a child to prove a point to the parent. Open the door. Claire." Click. The line went dead. I called the non-emergency number for the Metropolitan Police Department's Child Services Unit. The dispatcher's voice had the calm, dispassionate geography of someone who knows where every road goes and what every call means. I explained. I used no extra words. I used the word cold twice and the word child 3 times. You learn with age which words earn you action. "Officer is en route," she said. "Stay on the line if you like." "I'll stay by the phone," I said. "She'll need a place to come if she lets herself need it." My voice came out softer than I expected. Something in me unclenched at having finally done the thing instead of just thinking it. While I waited, I opened the hall closet and found the old army wool blanket Lillian used for picnics. It smelled like cedar and the one Saturday years ago we drove to the coast just because. I laid it across the couch, smoothing the wrinkles. I put a mug next to the kettle and set a jar of honey by it. Small hospitality for a small girl. Sometimes the only victory you get is the shape you make for the moment that might come. The callback came fast. "Officer Ruiz," a new voice said, low and clipped. "We're at the address. Laundry shed door is closed. I can see a faint light under it." "Knock hard," I said, surprising myself with the sharp command. His father believes volume is virtue. Use it. "Yes, sir." Muffled voices, the shuffle of boots, a pause thick as cold steel. Then, "We've got her with us on the porch," the officer said. "She's cold. She says she's fine. She's not. We'll be speaking to the parents about alternatives to this kind of consequence." The pause wasn't steel this time. It was kindness looking for the right holster. "Do you want to come get her for the night, Mr. Vance?" "Yes," I said, and my voice broke on the single syllable like a wave on a rock. The functional anger gave way, just for a moment, to pure relief. "Yes, I do." I'll wait here until you arrive. I drove the way old men drive when the thing they love is at the other end. Careful, steady, one eye on the speed limit, one eye on the dark, unforgiving road. The laundry shed door was open when I pulled up. The harsh overhead light made the bare concrete yard look even colder. Tempe stood between Officer Ruiz and Claire, who had wrapped her arms around herself like a coat, seemingly insulated against everything but her own rigid pride. "Evening, Mr. Vance," Officer Ruiz said. He was tall, not much older than my granddaughter will be when this is all a memory. He was the piece of forgiveness the law provided. We talked. "The girl can spend the night with you, Mr. Vance," Officer Ruiz confirmed, his voice professional but gentle. "That sits better than the laundry shed." Claire's face was tight, her arms still wrapped defensively around herself. We were trying to teach her. "Open doors teach," the officer said, his gaze unwavering. "Closed ones do other things. They trap and they chill." Tempe looked at me with a face that was mostly eyes, huge, dark pools reflecting the cold concrete and the harsh light. I opened my arms. She came in small and fast, a burst of frantic energy. Cold is a smell when it comes off a child. Metal, damp earth, and the raw, stinging ache of it. I wrapped her instantly in my coat, then added the spare wool blanket from my back seat. Her ear pressed tight against my chest, hearing the steady, predictable sound that made her believe what I said next. "You're warm now, kiddo," I murmured against her hair. "Warm and going home." Back at the brownstone, the kettle gave me steam on its first try. No fussing, no mechanical hesitations this time, as if the house itself understood the urgency of the moment. I made tea with honey and set her at the kitchen island with Mr. Chen's lentil stew. She ate like someone remembering what it means to be fed because you're unconditionally loved, the warmth spreading through her slowly, systematically. I called the dispatcher back and thanked her, making sure to log her name and the time. I texted Ms. Delacroix and told her our morning meeting had become non-negotiable and life-altering. Tempe fell asleep on the deep leather couch under Lillian's old wool blanket, the faint scent of dried lavender and cedar a quiet lullaby. The furnace clicked, hummed, and the thick, old vents whispered warmth into every corner of the room. I sat in my favorite chair and let the profound, weary quiet come settle next to me, like an old, trusted dog. My phone buzzed once more, a message from Adam. "We'll talk tomorrow. You'll see. I've got a plan." I deleted it without reading it twice. His plans are always centered on acquisition, never on care, I thought, a familiar wave of anger washing over me, immediately followed by the self-inflicted discipline of forgiveness, not for the action, but for the inherent, frustrating weakness behind it. I stood and checked the heavy locks a final time. Then I turned off the reading lamp and took one deliberate step toward the stairs. I didn't make it. I went back to the couch and moved the blanket up to Tempe's chin, slow and careful as a tide coming in. There are nights you choose where you will sleep. I chose the chair, my granddaughter within arm's reach, the grandfather clock keeping honest, measured time down the hall. Tomorrow can bring what it brings, I decided. Tonight, the house is warm. Tonight, I did not fail the architecture of her safety. By morning, the house had a new, essential sound. A small girl breathing, deep and safe. It threaded through the steady hum of the furnace and the tick of the baseboard heater, making everything else feel less like a precise machine and more like a home, a living entity. Tempe's hair stuck up in 3 brave directions when she sat up under Lillian's old wool blanket, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. I dreamed you had a boat, Grandpa, she mumbled. We went to an island where the sand was warm. I've got a car with 2 working seat warmers, I told her, my lips curving into a smile. That's the closest I can do on short notice. She managed a small, tentative smile in return, and then her face did a small, adult thing I recognized from the mirror, remembering where the day would inevitably take us. Do I have to go back tonight? We'll see what the day gives us, I said. First, steel-cut oatmeal. Doctor's orders. You're not a doctor, she challenged, a spark of her spirit returning. I'm a man who knows how to use a measuring cup, I retorted. She ate like she'd finally been given permission, spooning steam into a place inside her that had been cold too long. Her hands were red and deeply chapped at the knuckles. When she wasn't looking, I took 2 photographs of them in the clear kitchen light. Evidence looks like a lot of small, ordinary things until it's time to gather them, I thought, and you are profoundly glad you did. Ms. Delacroix's office sits on Oak Ridge Boulevard in a granite and brick building that believes in its own permanence. I had called her at 7:00, and she told me to come by at 9:00 with everything you've got, including your good sense. I printed Adam's text from last night and the voicemail transcription from Tempe. My phone app catches words better than I would have guessed. I wrote down the precise times. I added Officer Ruiz's name and the dispatcher's. 38 years as a structural engineer taught me that if it's not logged, it didn't happen. The integrity of the structure depends on the log. On the way out, I knocked on Mr. Chen's door. He answered with a good, heavy, dark blue coat in one hand and a small plastic bag of mandarin oranges in the other. Tell that girl I want the coat back in spring, he said, his eyes crinkling. Unless she grows like a weed and can't fit it, in which case I want a picture of her in it today. Done, I said, and meant it twice. A promise to a good man, and a commitment to my granddaughter's health. At Ms. Delacroix's office, we stayed 15 minutes in reception because her assistant had a patient calm and 3 cups of coffee more than I'd managed. Tempe read a magazine about classic cars with one hand while holding a mandarin orange in the other. The bright skin peels like confetti on her borrowed jeans. Ms. Delacroix called us in with a flick of her chin. She'd swapped her usual sharp pinstripe suit for a sober charcoal one. Elias, she greeted me, then looked at Tempe. And this must be the famous young astronomer from the mantle photo. Tempe straightened the borrowed coat. I wasn't really an astronomer, she clarified. I was just dressed like one. Most of us are, Monsieur Delacroix replied, the dry wit earning a small, genuine grin from Tempe. She gestured at the chairs. Let's get to work. Elias, show me what you've got. I laid out the printouts like I was setting a table for a serious negotiation. The defensive text from Adam, the chilling voicemail from Tempe, the time-stamped call log, Officer Ruiz's name, the photos of Tempe's hands. Ms. Delacroix looked without commentary, her pen tapping once every few seconds as if it had its own analytical heartbeat. And the rest we talked about last night? She asked. Safe combination changed? Documents secured? Done, I confirmed. The drafting room is locked. I moved Lillian's old quilting hoop into the hall closet so no one can claim it's a working room. Ms. Delacroix nodded. Good. Now, 2 tracks. The finances and the girl. She held up one finger. On the money side, she continued, I'm filing a memo to your bank authorizing them to call me if any large transfers are requested from your accounts over the next 60 days. I can't block you from your own money, nor should I, but we can slow things long enough to ask good questions. And the girl? I asked. She held up a second finger. We document everything. We ask the Metropolitan PD for the incident number from last night. We ask Officer Ruiz to note precisely what he saw. You'll call your primary care physician and ask how quickly you can get the girl seen at St. Luke's for a wellness check. If the officer noted exposure, St. Luke's will treat without parental consent if necessary. We won't go behind anyone's back for sport. We are protecting a child. We also have a meeting set with the school counselor this afternoon. Mandatory reporters know the drill and have resources. Tempe's spoon of borrowed yogurt paused midway to her mouth. What's a mandatory reporter? Good guys who are obligated to speak up when kids aren't safe, Ms. Delacroix explained. It's a job they do with their hearts and their paperwork. Tempe nodded, filing the new word where she could find it later. Okay. Ms. Delacroix capped her pen. Now for the part I wish I didn't have to say. Elias. She looked at me, and her tone went as careful as a surgeon's hand. Your son contacted me yesterday with questions about your competency. That tells me a longer plan is at work, a financial and custodial trap. He invites you to dinner with an apology on the menu and a stack of legal papers for dessert. Tempe's head whipped between us, concern clouding her young face. Like what kind of papers? Papers that turn me into a valet for my own life, I interjected before my lawyer could varnish the truth. Or papers that make it look like I'm unfit to care for myself, and certainly not for a girl who eats stew like a small, polite moose. Tempe almost smiled at the description. Ms. Delacroix raised her hand, silencing us both. And today, if you hear from your son, you do 3 things. 1, you set any meeting in a public, recorded place. 2, you bring a witness, me, or someone equally useless for emotional manipulation. And 3, you do not, under any circumstances, sign anything. I prefer rules I can count on my fingers, I said, nodding my approval. Good. And Elias, Ms. Delacroix's eyes softened in a way she usually bills extra for. You're not being dramatic. You're being prudent. There's a vital difference. We left with a thick folder, a clear, actionable plan, and 2 chicken salad sandwiches from the deli down the block, because Ms. Delacroix believes in protein as policy. In the car, I handed Tempe the school excuse note Ms. Delacroix had printed on letterhead. I'm not skipping, she said, defensive by reflex. You're taking care of yourself, I said. That landed somewhere she believed. We stopped at a discount electronics store. I bought a doorbell camera and a small digital recorder the clerk cheerfully swore worked with 1 button and no surprises. You starting a podcast, sir? He asked. Something like that, I said. 1 episode only. Back home, I set the camera to watch the porch and the little patch of winter grass. I showed Tempe how the recorder worked and asked her carefully if she'd be willing to repeat into it exactly what her voicemail had said last night. Just in case the phone company decides to forget, I told her. She nodded. Kids have an instinct for the way grown-up systems can lose things on purpose. She spoke into the recorder in a steady little voice that I wanted to wrap in a coat of its own. When she was done, I labeled the file on my computer and backed it up twice. Once to the secure hard drive, and once to a small USB Lillian used to call the toothpick. The names we give things matter. Tempe Laundry Shed Statement. Nov 21. It would mean more to me in a week than any legal transcript. At 10:40, my phone rang. Adam, the screen announced. I let it buzz once for my nerves and twice for my rekindled anger before I answered. Dad, he said, and the apology arrived first. soft and practiced. About last night, I was out of line. I'm worried, and it came out wrong. It did come out, I agreed, my voice flat. Wrong. A pause. A strategic reset. I want to make it right. Lunch at the old library bistro. I'll make a reservation for noon. We can get the lunch menu. Your favorite soup is on. The old library bistro at noon, I confirmed, looking over at Tempe, so only if you're fine with Ms. Delacroix joining us. Silence. I imagined him at his office desk, fingernails tapping a keyboard without seeing the screen. Why would Delacroix need to be there? This is family. She's family, I countered, knowing the slight jab would needle him just enough. She knows where the forks go. We'll split the check. He laughed, because he hates to sound cornered. Fine. Noon. I'll see if I can get a table near the windows. We can start fresh. I hung up and put my hand over the digital recorder, feeling its small, reassuring weight. A trap isn't less of a trap because you walk toward it with your eyes open, but you can pick your shoes. Do I have to come? Tempe asked, reading me the way only children and dogs can. You don't, I said. You'll go to school for a couple of hours. I'll pick you up at 1, and we'll go see a doctor who will confirm what anyone with eyes can see. Those hands weren't made for sleeping in a shed in November. She looked down at her knuckles, then back up. Okay, she said, and because she needed it said aloud, I added, you won't be alone in any room you don't want to be in. She nodded, then tentative. If Mom calls, can I answer? You can, I said. I'll be right next to you. Claire did call, once, twice, saying she'd had a chance to reflect and agreed the shed had been, perhaps, excessive. Parenting, she informed me, her voice now cool and superior, requires consistency. I agreed that it did and told her mine would be this. My door will open when the girl needs it, and I will involve the people whose job it is to make sure doors open more than they close. She hung up with a sound like a stapler bitten in half. I dropped Tempe at school with the excuse note, handing it to the office administrator who looked at the letterhead and then at me as if she wanted to hug and scold and deputize me all at once. We'll have her meet with Ms. Lockwood at lunch, she said. She's our counselor. I left my number and on impulse a copy of the photograph of Tempe's hands with the date scrolled at the bottom. She took it like it was something more than paper. At noon, the old library bistro had the light of the stained glass pouring its colored, quiet hush over the tables. Ms. Delacroix was there first, seated where a lawyer might sit if she wants to see who comes in before they see her. She stood when I approached and squeezed my shoulder in a way that said what lawyers don't write down. Adam arrived 3 minutes late, contrition practiced into posture. He wore the shirt I'd bought him 2 Christmases ago, the expensive one he saved for deals that required theater. He opened his arms like we were going to reenact a part of our lives I barely remembered. I gave him a hand instead. He shook it and used the shake to pull me close. Dad, he murmured. Look, don't make this ugly. Lunch, I said, firmly breaking the embrace. Soup, one thing at a time. He turned his polished smile on Ms. Delacroix. Nice of you to join us, counselor. Are we 3 splitting the check? Do you bill by the cracker? I bill by the hour, she said, smooth as an oath in church. Crackers are on the house. Shall we order? The waitress had the sort of kindness that notices who's looking at the menu but not reading it. She recommended the tomato basil soup to me and, because my face betrayed me, added that it wasn't as salty as it had been the last time I'd been in. Different cook today, she confided, and I believed her as if she oversaw the whole of the restaurant's fate. When the bread arrived, Adam folded his napkin in his lap with precision. He could do precision when it served him. He leaned forward. "Let's clear the air. I reacted yesterday because I'm worried. Your memory, your balance, the stove, things happen as people age." I took a slow sip of water, a small act of control. "Things do happen," I agreed. He produced a folder from the chair beside him. Nothing like a son who says he's here to apologize and brings a manila envelope to do it with. "I asked around," Adam said lightly, tearing off a piece of bread with a casual flourish that was entirely too rehearsed. "Friends of friends, family advisors. It's common practice to put some paperwork in place just in case. Temporary power of attorney. No big deal, Dad. It protects you. It protects something," LaCroix murmured, dipping a corner of her bread into her soup without taking her eyes off Adam. His smile thinned, betraying the crack in his composure. He slid the folder across the table as if we were simply sharing photographs of a recent trip. A notary's card peeked out, pink and ugly, like an uninvited guest at a wake. "Just have a look. We can sign today and be done." "Let's not sign anything today, Adam," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Let's eat soup and talk like people." He pushed the folder a fraction farther, leaning into the demand. I put my hand on it and held it there, steady, pressing it flat against the linen cloth. "Adam," I said, and I used the father voice, the deep, unforgiving monotone I hate using because it feels like a hammer, even when you set it down gently. "You put my granddaughter in the laundry shed last night." His face didn't flinch. He was too practiced for that. But his eyes betrayed him, flickering once toward the stained glass. "We gave her blankets," he countered instantly. "You gave her a story she will tell herself every winter when the wind hits the eaves," I said, my anger now a cold, clean tool. "You gave her cold where warmth should have been." "Discipline," he snapped, the word a reflex, and then he remembered where we were, in a room that smelled like reverence and good cooking, and softened it. "A consequence." Ms. Delacroix slid a paper from her own slender folder, the kind of move that looks like habit until you realize it's a meticulously calculated checkmate. "Officer Ruiz from the Metropolitan Police Department responded," she said, her voice dry and factual. "He's written up his report. Elias has the incident number. The girl has a meeting with a counselor today, and a wellness check after school." Ms. Delacroix allowed herself the smallest, most controlled smile. "We're all doing paperwork. Adam." My son's jaw tightened. He reached into his jacket pocket and set a small, yellow, sticky note on the table, a square with words written in his neat salesman's hand. "Fine," he conceded, his voice heavy with performative defeat. "You want paperwork? Here's what I'm offering." He slid it toward me like a peace treaty written on flimsy paper. "Sell the house, move somewhere manageable. I'll help you find a place. We put the proceeds into a trust. Everyone sleeps warm, and nobody has to call the police for attention." "Attention," I repeated, tasting a word that always leaves splinters. I lifted the sticky note. It contained a number, a large, greedy one, and below it, the demand. "Now." I folded it in half, then in half again, and put it into my shirt pocket without looking away from him. "You're in trouble, Adam," I said, gentle because the truth can bruise a man. A man doesn't come at his father with this much financial urgency unless something has his coattails. The waitress arrived with soup, and for a blessed minute, we ladled quiet into bowls. The basil rose like summer in the steam. I ate and felt my churning stomach remember its job. Then I took the folder he'd brought, the one containing the power of attorney documents, and slid it back to him across the polished table. "No signatures today," I said. "No decisions at a table where the stained glass makes everything look prettier than it is." He breathed out through his nose slowly, a controlled sigh of immense frustration. "You think you're the only one who cares about Tempe?" His voice dropped to something that didn't belong in a church-turned bistro. "You think you're the hero because you've got time and a chair that remembers your shape?" There, finally, was the man I knew. Resentful, selfish. I let him show his face. "I think I'm the man with a spare blanket," I said. "Sometimes that's the whole job." He sat back hard enough to chime the silverware. "You know what? Keep your house. Keep your blanket. But understand this. My daughter is my responsibility. You don't get to interfere." Ms. Delacroix lifted her napkin and dabbed at the corner of her mouth like she'd caught a crumb of law there. "Protecting a child from exposure is not interference. Adam," she stated, her voice ironclad, "it's civilization." Adam laughed. A short, sharp sound, all teeth and no humor. "You going to put that on your website, counselor?" "You bet your retainer," she said pleasantly. We finished lunch with the kind of performative small talk that keeps you from arrest. Weather, the local football team, the soup's salt level. Adam paid performatively, laying the exact cash tip on the table like he was issuing an allowance. At the host stand, he turned back. "Dinner tonight?" he asked, the words like chess pieces placed not for now but for later. "Claire's making lasagna. Tempe should be home for that." "I'll bring her at 6, I said, meeting his challenge with my own rule. "And I'll come in with her, and I'll leave when she tells me she's comfortable." He nodded, a sharp, unwilling motion that did not constitute agreement. 6. On the sidewalk, Ms. Delacroix touched my elbow. "You okay?" "Better than I used to be at this," I admitted. "Worse than I want to be." "Welcome to the human condition, Elias," she said, slipping her hands into her pockets. "Call me after the doctor." I picked up Tempe at 1. Mia Lockwood, the school counselor, met me in the office, a woman with good, sensible shoes and the kind of eyes that see two things at once: the child and the complex, unforgiving system the child swims in. "She's bright," Mia said. "Polite. She told me last night was a consequence. And then she told me what her teeth felt like." Mia's face was calm, professional, but deeply resolute. "I'll be filing with the proper channels, Mr. Vance. You're not alone. People say that and don't always mean it." She did. I thanked her and meant it like a blessing. At St. Luke's Medical Center, a nurse named Anthony took Tempe's temperature and looked carefully at her hands, writing everything down as if the act of writing could warm a girl. "Mild hypothermia last night by her description," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Chapped and likely early frost nip at the knuckles. No lasting harm if we keep her warm and moisturized and stop making sheds into bedrooms." He paused, looking directly at me. "I'm making a report. It's not about getting anyone in trouble. It's about getting help they might not take otherwise." Tempe squeezed my hand, as if she'd found a rope on a difficult climb, and didn't mind who saw her hold it. "Can we still have lasagna?" she asked. "Because priorities are how you stay human." "We can have lasagna," I said. "And we'll have a bag packed in the car, just in case the night turns colder than the oven can fix." Back home, I put a small duffel by the front door. Pajama pants, the fleece Lillian had bought me and I never wore because it felt like a cloud that made me sentimental, and socks thick as pancakes. I added the digital recorder and a new notebook I titled in block letters on the first page. Tempe. Observations and events. I wrote the date. I wrote the time. I wrote that the house was 70°, and the girl ate 2 slices of toast with honey and asked if we could listen to the radio on the way to dinner. It looked small. It looked like everything. At 5:30, my doorbell camera, now smarter than it looked, caught a shape on the porch. Adam. He hadn't waited for 6. He wore the same shirt. He'd removed the apology from his face. Only the purpose remained. Change of plan, he said, already stepping in as if the act of entering made it so. Claire's not feeling great. I'll take Tempe now. You can come by later. I looked beyond him at the yard, where the light was turning the tips of the hedge the color of pennies. We'll stick to the plan, I said, planting myself firmly in the doorway. 6. I'll bring her. We'll walk in together. His smile now had edges sharp enough to cut. Don't be difficult. Dad. I moved my body just enough to make the door a question, a barrier of my own will. I'm not being difficult. Adam. I'm being chronological. He leaned in, dropping his voice to a low, conspiratorial murmur. Dad, you complicate this. I call a lawyer who isn't fond of crackers, and we spend the spring arguing about whether you're fit to make your own choices. Do you want that? He lifted his brows in a way that used to get him an extra cookie. I put my hand on the door where the new camera could see us both. I let my voice go calm as a lake at 5:00 a.m. I want the girl warm and safe. Everything else is a math problem for people who like math. I lifted my phone so the little light glowed. And I want you to know I'm recording. He swore softly, the kind of word that sounds ugly in a hallway lined with family photos. You're unbelievable. Maybe, I said. I've been called worse by better men. We held there a minute, a standoff civilized only by the fact we shared a face cut from the same stubborn wood. Then he stepped back. 6, he said. Don't be late. When he was gone, the air in the house seemed to let its breath out. I checked the camera. It had caught the whole exchange. Light good enough to see his expression when he noticed the lens. Audio clear. I saved it to the toothpick and labeled it like I label everything. Adam porch escalation. Tempe came downstairs in the fleece, sleeves too long, looking both small and invincible. We're still going? She asked. We're still going, I confirmed. And we're coming back with you in the car, no matter how good the lasagna is. She nodded. Then she did a thing she doesn't let herself do often. She put her head against my chest for exactly 3 seconds. Okay, she said into the fabric. Okay. We left at 5:55. The duffel was in the trunk, the recorder in my coat pocket, the notebook on the passenger seat under the insurance card. The sky over Elmrest Avenue was the color of a bruise healing. That's when my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. This is Dr. Morrison. I received a call from St. Luke's regarding Tempe. Could we talk tonight? Briefly, it's important. The contrite dinner had been the trap. The day had been the counter. And now a door I hadn't planned on was opening all by itself. I pulled to the curb and called him with the car in park and the heater ticking. Elias, he said, his voice efficient but not unkind. Thank you for calling back. I examined Tempe's chart from St. Luke's and spoke with the nurse. Based on her description of last night and what we saw today, chapped knuckles, early cold injury, the shivering that took a while to stop. I'm filing a mandated report. I wanted you to hear that from me, not as a surprise. Thank you, doctor, I said, and my hand found Tempe's knee. She looked at me, not frightened so much as alert. like a kid learning a town by its bus routes. What does that mean for tonight? It means this, the doctor said. If anything tonight looks like a repeat, forced exposure, withholding warmth, intimidation, leave. Call 911 if you can't leave safely. If you do leave, text me so I can document that as well. He paused. And Elias, don't be alone with a bad decision. Keep people in the loop. I've got a lawyer in the loop, I said, and an officer who knows our names. Good, he said. One more thing. Tempe's lungs sounded tight when she exerted herself here. Cold can do that. I'm sending an inhaler prescription to the St. Luke's outpatient pharmacy. I don't think we're dealing with asthma, not yet. But I'd rather you have it than not. Tempe leaned toward the speaker. Do I have to use it every day? No, the doctor said. Only if you're wheezing or it feels like there's a rubber band around your chest. And if anyone tells you to sleep in the shed again, the inhaler won't help with that. Warmth will. Tempe nodded at nobody and everybody. Okay. Elias, Dr. Morrison said, quieter. Is she safe going back in that house tonight? She won't be alone, I said, a promise I would keep. And she won't stay if she's not comfortable. Then that's your plan. Stick to it and text me after. I hung up and watched the last of the light drain down the block like water from a sink. I could feel the girl looking at me, waiting for the new rule. New rule, I said. You feel your chest get tight. You say it out loud. You want to leave. You say it out loud. You don't have to make it palatable for anybody. She worked the word palatable around in her mouth like a new flavor. Okay, she said. What if Dad gets mad? Then we meet Officer Ruiz again, I said. He's tall and calm and carries a radio that makes people remember manners. Tempe smiled, brief and guilty, like laughter had snuck past her guard. I put the car in gear and pulled back into traffic. Claire's house threw off a square of kitchen light that looked friendly from the sidewalk and less friendly as soon as you stepped into it. Lasagna waited on the stove, scent of oregano and an effort at normal. Claire wiped her hands on a dish towel and aimed a practiced, tight smile at the girl. There's my guy, she said. Ready to eat? Sure, Tempe said. She kept her coat on. You learn fast when warmth has been conditional. Adam came in from the hall, sleeves rolled, theater already underway. 6 on the dot, he said to me, his tone barbed. We should put a bell on you. Doorbells work, I said, nodding toward the new camera I knew he'd seen. The look he shot at me told me he knew exactly what I meant. We sat. Claire served portion sizes that tried to send the message we all wanted the same thing. Tempe's fork made scratchy sounds on her plate. Adam poured himself red wine and me water with a flourish, as if what a man drinks proves something important about him. So, he said brightly, soup at lunch, lasagna at dinner. Someday you'll thank me for upgrading your diet, Dad. We'll send you a certificate, I said, and saw Claire's mouth pinch into a white half-moon. Humor is a small knife. Sometimes it opens a box. Sometimes it cuts your own thumb. We managed 3 minutes of tense calm. Then Adam set his fork down with precision. Tempe, he said, about last night. The girl went narrower, the way you do when you think smaller might make you safer. Yes, sir. Can you tell your grandfather why we did what we did? Claire didn't look at either of them. She studied her own plate like it held answers. Tempe's eyes flicked to me and back to her plate. Consequences? She said softly. I was disrespectful. Adam nodded like a man proud of a pupil. Exactly. Disrespect has consequences in this house. Right. Claire? Right, she said, a little late. Describe disrespect for me, I said, my voice cutting through the heavy air. So, we all use the same dictionary. Adam. His smile thinned. We're not teaching a seminar. Dad, Adam snapped, his voice tight. Humor me, I said, leaning back, the picture of an ancient man needing things spelled out. I'm old. I need clear terms. Tempe stared at the lasagna, but her small voice cut through the tension. I rolled my eyes, she murmured, and I said I didn't want to shovel because my hands hurt. They only hurt because he refuses the gloves I bought him, Adam said quickly, addressing the room, not me. He wants special treatment for normal chores. Is the shed normal treatment? I asked, my voice dangerously mild. We gave him blankets, Claire said quickly, her voice high-pitched, as if speed could add warmth to the inadequate word. He was fine. Cold is not a consequence, I stated, the architect's final word on the matter. It's a hazard. Adam pushed his glass away so it wouldn't spill when he leaned forward, his patience finally snapping. You called the sheriff, he said, and the bright, polished tone went dull, revealing the raw anger underneath. Involving strangers in family discipline is a line, Dad. We involved people whose job it is to keep the small safe from the large when the large make mistakes, I countered. I've made mistakes. I've had men step in. It didn't kill me. He made his mouth into a smile, but his eyes were something else entirely. A calculated, cynical malice. Yes, well, you were always fond of an audience. Only when someone was performing. Adam, I returned, meeting his gaze. Enough, Claire said suddenly, the word sharp and final, addressed to both of us. She stood, collected plates, and set them too firmly in the sink, the clatter a release of her own rising tension. Eat your food, Tempe. The girl lifted the fork obediently and then paused, her small hand flying to her chest. It's tight, she whispered. Right here. It was the smallest sentence, yet it rearranged the entire room. I was moving before I knew I'd stood. Coat, kiddo, I said, already reaching for the duffel bag I'd placed by the door. The digital recorder in my pocket was on. I'd thumbed the button at the threshold out of habit. Inhalers in the car. We're going. Adam's chair scraped hard enough against the floor to leave a mark. Sit down, he snapped. No, I said, and the single word sounded remarkably like permission. She says her chest is tight. She and I are leaving. We'll be back when we're back. Claire's hand caught the counter for support. He's fine, she said, but her voice went high on the last word, betraying her doubt. Tempe coughed, the dry, rattling kind that means business. She swayed slightly. I had Mr. Chen's coat around her, her hat on her head, and my hand on her shoulder, a structural brace. We made it to the door. Adam's arm slammed down across the jamb like a gate. You're not taking her, he said, his face inches from mine. Move, I said, my voice low and level. Or I will move you. I didn't raise my voice. The threat was in the absolute conviction of the statement. He took one measured step closer. You lay a hand on me. I call the police and tell them you're confused and violent. You do that, I said, holding his gaze. Make sure to tell them the part where your daughter slept on concrete last night. He hesitated. Only a second, but long enough for me to thumb the side button on my phone, already dialing the police, a second siren I'd preset to call. I don't like phones that do more than ring. Tonight, I liked mine fine. Tempe made a small, distressed sound that wasn't quite a word. That decided the math for me. I shifted my grip, slid us through the space Adam's hesitation left, and was on the porch with the cold November air on my face and the girl tucked in my arm like a promise I'd finally learned how to keep. Adam followed, his anger radiating heat. "Claire!" he called. "Get my keys!" "No," she said from the kitchen, her voice steady as a plate set down right where you meant to. "No." We were halfway down the walk when the first flicker of blue light hit the hedge. The Metropolitan PD moves quickly when children and cold are mentioned in the same report. Officer Ruiz unfolded from his car like a man who knows how to use his height and doesn't need to. He didn't put his hand on his weapon. He put it on the radio mic and squeezed once, a gesture that told every neighbor watching from behind curtains that order had arrived. "Evening," he said, breathing steam. His eyes went straight to Tempe. "Breathing tight," the girl said, her hands still at her chest. "Feels like a rubber band." "Okay." Ruiz looked past me at Adam. "Sir, step back to the porch, please." Adam showed him his best business smile. "Officer? Deputy?" Ruiz said, pleasant but firm. "Porch." Adam retreated. He's good at turning a retreat into choreography. "You're leaving?" Ruiz asked me, his eyes back on the work. "Yes," I said. "The doctor wants documentation if this happens again." "Good," he said. "I'll follow you. Makes everyone's life easier." He did more than follow. He walked me to the car, opened the passenger door, and crouched so he was eye level with the girl. "You got an inhaler?" "They're in the bag," I confirmed. "Use it if you need to," Ruiz told Tempe. "You did the right thing saying it out loud." The girl nodded, something unclenching in her jaw. The officer turned his head just enough to aim a sentence back at the porch without looking at it. "Sir, ma'am, if either of you attempt to block this car, we'll handle that as its own thing. Don't make me write a second report tonight." Claire made a small noise of protest that sounded like it wanted to be an apology and wasn't brave enough. Adam said nothing, but his face had gone flatter, as if he was setting himself to be the wronged party in a play he'd already cast. We drove with the officer behind us and the duffel at Tempe's feet. In the emergency room bay, order becomes habit. Triage nurse, pulse ox, a doctor who shakes hands like a man who knows they're a bridge. "Doctor." Morrison met us halfway between a curtain and a monitor, coat still on, hair in the kind of disarray professionals earn. "Hi there," he said to Tempe as if they'd planned to meet for pie. "Rubber band feeling?" "Less now," she said, "but still a little." "Okay." The doctor listened with the careful way you listen when the thing you're listening to is smaller than the stakes. He had Tempe breathe, cough, breathe again. "We'll do 2 puffs to be safe," he said. "And then we'll sit here and be bored for 20 minutes. Bored is our goal." He put us in a room and stepped into the hall with me and Officer Ruiz. "I made my report," he said quietly. "The intake team's already flagged it. I can't promise timeline. Bureaucracy moves like honey in February. But tonight, we can make a practical plan." Officer Ruiz nodded like men do when they've chosen the same road. "I can file a temporary safety notification that the child should not be removed from a safe caregiver until an assessment is complete," he offered. "It's not custody. It's common sense with paperwork." I looked through the half-drawn curtain at Tempe, who had her palms cupped around the inhaler like it was a bird she intended to protect. "We'll take common sense," I said. "Good," Morrison said. "And Elias, since you'll likely have her for a few nights, there's a caregiver authorization form we can put on file. Lets you consent to treatment if she scrapes a knee at midnight. It's not a transfer. It's a permission slip the universe understands." "We like permission slips," I said. "See, we like them with dates and signatures." Ruiz's radio murmured the static of other people's problems. He touched it, then looked at me. I'll go talk to the parents in the waiting room. Keep it boring. He tipped his head toward Tempe. That one's doing her part. He left us to the 20 minutes that save you. The inhaler did its easy magic. Tempe's shoulders settled a fraction lower with each breath. The pulse ox climbed from a number I didn't care for to one that made the nurses nod in that small, satisfied way that looks like a prayer answered without fuss. "Grandpa," she said, "I'm here. Do we have to go back tonight?" "No," I said. "You're coming home with me. Officer Ruiz is going to write a sentence that says so in a language your dad respects, even when he doesn't like it." She let her head fall against the pillow with the relief of a soldier who hears someone else's boots take a watch. "Okay," she said. "Can we have toast?" "2 slices," I said. "And you can peel a mandarin with your bare hands like a magician." She smiled for real then, the kind that brings color back to a face. Ms. Delacroix arrived in the doorway like a man who'd walked fast and decided only at the last second not to run. He took in the monitors, the girl, my posture, and nodded once. "We're not signing anything tonight?" he asked, a battered joke. "Only the forms that let the right people do the right thing," I said. "The doctor has a permission slip. The universe understands." "Excellent," he said, and used the sleeve of his coat to wipe his forehead as if to polish his thinking. "I've drafted a statement from you, Elias, about the events of last night and tonight. Short, factual. We'll attach the officer's notice and the physician's report. Tomorrow morning, we file a petition for temporary guardianship. That doesn't mean forever. It means the court acknowledges a reality we're already living." "Tomorrow," I repeated, and felt the words settle in my chest like a weight I could carry. "Okay." Ms. Delacroix looked into the room at Tempe. "How are we doing, Captain?" "Bored," Tempe said solemnly, and Ms. Delacroix's face did a thing men's faces do when they remember what they're fighting for. Officer Ruiz returned with his paperwork and a face that had decided on neutral for the sake of the evening. "Parents are informed," he said. "They disagreed vigorously, which is their right. I reminded them they also have a right to go home, sleep, and not make things worse. They took the second option." "Thank you," I said. "I'm not the one who said the magic words," he said, tipping his chin toward Tempe. "He did. A lot of grown men don't manage that." The doctor handed me 2 printouts, discharge instructions and the caregiver authorization. "See, keep these with you," he said. "If someone needs to see them, show them and then put them back in your pocket. You don't owe anyone other than authorities a debate about them." "Copy and toothpick," I said. "Excuse me?" "Never mind," I said, smiling faintly. Inside joke with a thumb drive. We left under the soft fluorescent light hospitals wear late, the kind that makes everyone look like they've been saved and are too tired to celebrate. Ruiz walked us to the car again and then stopped, hand on the frame, a man checking the hinge on a gate that matters. "You've got my card," he said. "If you don't, you do now." He slipped a fresh one into my palm and then did a thing officers still do when no one's watching. Tipped his hat to a child who's been brave. At home, the house lifted its shoulders and made more space. I turned on the porch light and, because routine saves us, set the kettle. Tempe sat at the table, inhaler in front of her like a trophy, and peeled a mandarin with the concentration of a surgeon. The orange oils misted the air with a smell that reminded me of summer in a room winter had not yet given back. "Text the doctor," she said around a section of fruit. He said to text. "Bossy," I said, thumbs already moving. "I like it." I told Morrison we were home. The girl was breathing easy. We had paperwork and toast. He texted back a thumbs up and the sort of sentence that costs a man 5 minutes and saves another man a night. You did the right thing. Ms. Delacroix stayed long enough to eat a slice of toast and write the time on the front page of the notebook I'd started. 7:42 p.m. Tight chest at dinner. ER. Inhaler. Discharge. Deputy notice. He underlined each item like a teacher who believes in lists. Not because they're tidy, but because they chain the days together into a rope. Tomorrow night, he said at the door. Courthouse first. Then we make lunch seem possible. Bring crackers. I hear you bill for them, I said. He smiled and let himself out into the night, his shoulders smaller once the job of the hour had been done. I made Tempe's couch into a ship again. Blankets smooth, pillow at the angle she likes, Lillian's wool smelling faintly of cedar, and a day at the lake we never took, but talk about as if we did. She brushed her teeth with the new toothbrush we'd bought the day I pretended we were just running errands. Afterward, she stood in the doorway to the stairs and looked up at the dark, as if nighttime itself were a problem she could solve by staring hard enough. What? I asked. Mom used to read me a thing, she said, about a ship in a bottle. The ship was safe and also stuck. I don't know if I liked it. We'll find you a different thing, I said. One where the ship is safe and also moving. She nodded once, a solemn little king. Then she walked to the couch, burrowed, and let her body do that brave act of trust called sleep. I sat in my chair and let the day lay itself out like tools on a bench. The phone call, the lasagna, the rubber band chest, the officer's hat, the doctor's steady hands, the signature on a form that isn't a solution so much as a bridge. Outside, the wind felt at the windows in the old way. Inside, the furnace hummed. The doorbell camera's tiny blue eye watched Elmrest forget us for a few hours. At 10, my phone buzzed. Adam. I let it ring. It rang again. I put it face down on the end table and watched the ceiling instead. The faint hairline crack in the plaster I'd been meaning to fix since 1998. A man can live his whole life under a line like that, and only notice it on the nights he decides not to be afraid. So, when the house had finished settling and the girl's breathing had found its honest rhythm, I stood. I went to the drafting room door, locked as it should be, and then to the hall closet where the fleece and the duffel waited. I added a pair of sneakers to the bag and a copy of the caregiver form folded in thirds, the way my father taught me to fold anything important. I replaced the batteries in a flashlight. I wrote batteries replaced in the notebook and underlined it, because sometimes an old man needs proof he is still doing the small things right. Then I sat again and moved the blanket up to Tempe's chin, slow as tide, careful as breath. The day had pinched us. We did not break, I thought, watching Adam's retreating back. We bent toward the people who know how to keep the small safe, and tomorrow there would be the courthouse, a structure of granite and cold logic, and a stack of paper that weighs no more than a pound and changes a life by 10 degrees, figuratively and literally. And tomorrow there would be more men and women in ties and sober suits than I like under one roof. And tomorrow there would be more chances to be kind, more chances to act, and, inevitably, more chances to fail. Tonight, however, there was a girl asleep in a warm room, an inhaler resting on the kitchen island, Officer Ruiz's card, a promise in my shirt pocket, and a form with my name on it that said one thing in a language even November respects. She is mine to keep warm until the people with stamps and seals say otherwise. The grandfather clock in the hall said 10:30, then 11, then whatever comes after a man stops looking at the time and starts listening to the house settle. Somewhere down the block, a train spoke its iron sentence to the night. a sound of heavy inevitability, but the house answered with a steady hum that sounded for the first time in a long time like promise. Morning has a different gravity when a child sleeps under your roof, I mused, walking quietly to the kitchen. The kettle sounds less like a desperate whistle and more like a promise kept. Tempe woke to the soft clatter of spoons, sat up in the fleece with her hair doing cartwheels, and sniffed the air like a small, newly dispatched detective. "Toast?" she asked, as if the day hinged entirely on bread. "Toast?" I confirmed, smiling, "and eggs if the hens at the grocery store did their part." She ate as if breakfast were a vote of confidence she didn't intend to waste, and I wrote the times in the notebook. 7, 12 up, 7, 23 no wheezing, 7, 31 2 slices, 1 egg, asks about school. There is comfort in ink that turns the private anxiety into a public, necessary record. Ms. Delacroix called at 8:00 a.m. "We have a judge at 9:45 who isn't allergic to reality," she said, the slight tremor of urgency in her voice telling me more than the words. "Bring the officer's notice, the ER discharge, and that porch video if you're willing." "It's already on the toothpick," I said, referring to Lillian's old USB drive. "You and the toothpick," she muttered fondly, a quick flash of professional exasperation. "Good. And Elias, no speeches unless asked. Facts carry farther than outrage." "The older I get," I replied, pulling on a sensible coat, "the more I want the paper to talk." The paper will talk," she assured me. "I'll make sure it uses its outdoor voice." We were tying shoelaces when the doorbell, my new small Cyclops, saw a figure in a dark red coat and had the courtesy to sing its chime about it. Mr. Chen stood on the stoop with a grocery sack and the kind of face you trust even when you haven't decided to. "I brought tamales," he said, holding out the bag as if it were a peace treaty for the new day. "Also, my grandson made me check our door camera last night after he saw the patrol car. It caught something you should see." He set his phone on the table and tapped the screen with a fingernail that could open a can. The video was grainy but faithful, time-stamped 9:03 p.m. The hour when kitchens across Elmrest Avenue trade gossip with their sinks. Our view was across the street, capturing Adam's driveway and the lip of the shed door. The audio was soft, but neighbor houses trade sound the way they trade air. Adam's voice came first, the tone he uses when he wants the world to audition for his approval. "Timer starts now," he said. "Hands visible. Jacket later if you're compliant. If you talk back, we restart." Claire's voice followed, not quite a whisper, not quite a protest. "He's shivering, Adam." "That's the point," he said, the purpose obvious, baked into every syllable. Shivering is a feedback loop. He connects disrespect to discomfort. He learns. My hand tightened on the back of the kitchen chair until the wood made a small sound of endurance. On the screen, a sliver of Tempe's profile registered as a motion blur. Thin arms crossed, trying to be smaller than physics allows. She didn't cry. She did the quiet shake you do when your bones have decided to talk to themselves. Mr. Chen's grandson, off camera, whispered. It got most of it. I boosted the audio. "You can have the file." The boy's voice had that mix you hear when a teenager meets the world. Morsels of scorn for the adults being ridiculous, ladlefuls of tenderness for the child caught in it. Tempe watched the screen and held herself very still, as if movement would break something fragile and needed. "I didn't know you could hear them from there," she said, her voice barely a breath. "Sound travels," Mr. Chen said softly, a simple but profound statement. I thanked him the way men like me thank, with my palm over my heart and less eloquence than the moment demanded. He squeezed my wrist like a coach sending in a player for a fourth quarter neither of us trained for. When the door shut behind him, Tempe still stood looking at the black mirror of the phone. "He had a timer," she said, the words factual, not a complaint. "He always has a timer." "How long?" I asked, my voice steady because hers needed mine to be. "It depends," she said. She lifted her fingers like she was counting ghosts. "Sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes an hour. If I argue, we start over." She pulled her backpack to the table and dug past the world a girl carries. Spanish worksheet, pencil nub, crumpled receipt for a school lunch she didn't like, to produce a folded piece of paper with the stiffness of something laminated and handled. She slid it to me. "It's the rules," she said, and the quiet pride in having gathered evidence told me she'd been waiting to hand me this for a while. I unfolded it. Someone, Adam, unless my eyes lied, had typed a chart and then plastic-sleeved it like a menu. Winter Compliance Protocol. The top line read, as if brutality could be improved with a title. The columns looked like a joke nobody would tell. Infraction, exposure level, duration, jacket threshold, reflection time. The line items were sickeningly precise. Eye roll at directive, level 1, 20 min, no jacket, 3 min reflection. Refusal to shovel, level 2, 45 min, jacket at 30, 10 min reflection. Talking back, level 3, 60 min, jacket at 40 if compliant. Reflection 15. There were checkboxes for restart due to attitude at the bottom, and in a sharp, neat hand, a note. If he calls Dad, add 10. It landed in my gut like a cold stone dropped through water. This wasn't temper. It wasn't even neglect in the loose, sloppy sense that lets a person pretend. It was a system. It was cold, mapped into morality. "Who wrote this?" I asked, my thumb on the laminate so I wouldn't tear it in half, just to feel it fail. "Dad," Tempe said. "He printed it at work. Mom said it made things consistent. She said consistency is love. There are sentences a man hears that he underlines on the inside of his skull. Consistency is love applied to a shed." I folded the page back along its creases and felt something in me stop negotiating. "The judge is going to see this," I said. Tempe nodded, and then made her voice even smaller. "You won't get in trouble for having it, If anyone gets in trouble for handing me a piece of paper," I said, standing up, the paper now burning through my pocket, "they can talk to my lawyer and to the part of me that doesn't forget." We drove downtown with the furnace throwing its quiet warmth and my mind inventorying each small tool we had. Officer's notice, discharge instructions, neighbor's video, laminated protocol. Ms. Delacroix met us on the courthouse steps under a sky polished thin by a wind that liked to show off. She tucked the laminated sheet into her folder like a man setting a match near dry wood and knowing what fire is for. "This is intentional," she said, uncharacteristically blunt. "That matters." The courtroom was everything a person wants from an institution. Wood older than all of us, the flag hanging straight, a judge who kept his eyebrows and his sentences restrained. We sat at the petitioner's table with our pile of paper and our hearts doing work they hadn't expected this month. Across from us, Adam and Claire arranged themselves into the shape of people trying very hard to look like the good version of themselves. Adam had brought a lawyer who wore an expensive tie in contempt, like an aftershave. The judge, Honorable Pierce, as the placard read, looked at his docket, then at us. "This is a petition for temporary guardianship," he said, his voice measured. "Allegations of endangerment by cold exposure. We will proceed with facts. Counsel for petitioner." Ms. Delacroix stood. Her voice had the weight of someone carrying exactly as much outrage as the facts entitled her to, and not a gram more. Your Honor, the child spent last night at my client's home after being instructed to sleep in a shed as discipline. We have a report from Officer Ruiz of the Metropolitan Police Department documenting that removal. We have an emergency department record noting early cold injury and a mandated report filed by Dr. Mo Morrison. And, Your Honor, we have a document written by the father entitled Winter Compliance Protocol that systematizes forced cold exposure. May I approach? You could feel the room lean forward the way people lean toward a radio when they recognize a song. Ms. Delacroix handed up the protocol. The judge took it as if paper could burn. His eyes moved left to right, down, left to right again. He put his finger on the bottom note. If he calls Dad, add 10. And the smallest muscle in his cheek twitched. Counsel for respondent? He asked without looking up. The Thai lawyer stood and smiled the way you smile when you have an answer, and wished the question had been different. Your Honor, parenting is not one size fits all. My clients employ consequences intended to teach respect. It was not below freezing in the shed. Blankets were supplied. The child was checked on. The document, he gestured toward the map of cruelty, is an unfortunate attempt to introduce structure, not a plan to harm. The judge set the protocol down as if it had weight. You have an answer to the line that reads, add 10 if he calls Dad. Children sometimes manipulate, the Thai said smoothly. Parents must stay firm. Indeed, the judge said, his tone dry. And courts must also. Ms. Delacroix didn't press. She didn't need to. She introduced the neighbor's video next. Mr. Chen's grandson had already emailed us a file with a date and a time. The judge watched a minute of it, long enough to hear timer starts now and Claire's he's shivering, long enough to learn the feel of the voices. He nodded once and returned the tablet. Officer Ruiz, the judge said. I hadn't noticed the officer took a bench along the wall, but he had, hat in hand, a posture that wanted to be invisible and settled for unimpeachable. He rose. You removed the child last night? Yes, Your Honor, Ruiz said. He was shivering. He described sleeping in the shed as a consequence. I advised the parents against repeated cold exposure. I filed a notification to keep the child with a safe caregiver until assessment. Thank you, the judge said, and if there was gratitude in it, it was for more than a report. Dr. Morrison arrived midstream, his hair admonished but not fully controlled, his coat folded over his arm like a man who started the day at a sprint. The clerk swore him in. He kept his testimony as clean as a ledger. Mild hypothermia by history, chapped knuckles, tightness in chest that responded to albuterol. Mandated report filed. This was not a child who slipped into a chilly room, he said evenly. This was a child who was placed into cold and told to stay. Section Georges Delacroix rested when the air felt full of facts and thinner on rationalizations. The Thai lawyer tried to pivot. He presented a letter from a neighbor with a first name only, Luann, extolling Adam's love of family and commitment to structure. He hinted lightly, as if sprinkling parsley, that my age made me prone to misinterpretations born of cognitive decline. Prone, the judge repeated, and there are words that don't sound strong next to what we'd hauled into the room. Your Honor, Ms. Delacroix said, not standing, but not letting it slide past. The only confusion on evidence today is between consequence and calculated cold. Judge Pierce leaned back, the way judges do when they're gathering multiple thoughts into one decision. He cleaned his glasses with a handkerchief that had seen better starch. Temporary guardianship to the petitioner, he said at last, as if posting a speed limit. Effective immediately. The child will remain with his grandfather for 72 hours while Child Protective Services conducts an assessment. During that time, the parents will have supervised visitation at CPS. He paused, looking at Adam and Claire. Further, a protective order. No cold exposure discipline in any form. That should not have to be said, but we will say it. Counsel, you will both meet with the clerk for information on scheduling. Officer, see that the order is served. Adam's face tried on 3 expressions in 5 seconds and liked none of them. Claire put a hand on his sleeve and found, perhaps for the first time in a year, that it didn't move anything. I looked at Tempe. She looked at the clock as if time itself had finally agreed to stop being a joke. We left with a packet that weighed less than a sandwich and would keep a girl warm for 3 nights. On the courthouse steps, we met a woman with a badge at her waist and the kind of stance that says she can listen to grief without drowning. Detective Laura King, she said, offering a card. Family Crimes Unit. The mandated report will cross my desk this afternoon. I wanted you to know a real person reads those. I shook her hand, surprised by the steadying force of a stranger's name. We have more than the report, I said, and Miss Delacroix slid her a copy of the protocol and a thumb drive with the neighbor's video, because I was already corrupting her with the gospel of the toothpick. Detective King didn't wince at the title, Winter Compliance Protocol. She only said, "That's deliberate." Then lower, as if talking to herself, and stupid. She tucked the evidence away. I'll be in touch. In the meantime, do the things on the paper. Don't do the things not on the paper. She aimed the last part at me and smiled like she knew exactly how much trouble a man my age could make when his blood decided to be 20 again. At the car, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered because the day had decided to throw knives and I'd learned to catch them. A woman's voice. Efficient. This is ADA Erica Stone. Detective King just pinged me. I'm not promising charges. We're not there, but I am promising eyes. If something escalates, you call 911 and then you text me. Numbers are on the card the detective gave you. I thanked her and realized my thank yous had been working the day shift and the night shift since dawn. At home, the house seemed taller, as if the new paper gave the ceiling permission to shrug. Evan changed into the sweatpants we'd bought on purpose, not as a contingency, and sank into the couch with a comic book Mrs. Ruiz's grandson had tucked into the tamale bag like a smuggled kindness. I hung the protective order on the inside of the hall closet door with 2 magnets from places Ellen and I never went but bought postcards of. Yellowstone, Paris. Lunch was soup and relief. Then Evan asked the question even good news can't quiet forever. What happens after 3 days? We keep him warm for the 4th, I said, and for the 5th, and we keep giving the right people the right paper until the paper and the people say the same thing. Around 3:00 p.m., Mia Lockwood from school called. We had a visit from CPS, she said. They interviewed Evan here to avoid pulling him from class again. He did well, spoke plainly. He gave them the same language he gave me. He also mentioned a reflection he's told to do after cold. Do you know what that is? Like a punishment essay? I asked. Worse, she said, and I heard the scrape of her chair as she settled in. To be precise, it's a script. He has to write that he is weak and that discomfort is good for him, that it teaches him not to be dramatic. He uses those words like they were his idea. I looked at the protocol sheet and saw reflection 15 as if it had been hiding a full sentence behind those numerals. The ledger wasn't about changing behavior, it was about changing belief. Thank you, I said. Please document what you can while the facts are fresh. Already done, she said, and I liked her more than I had an hour ago, which had already been plenty. By late afternoon, the day had changed shape. It wasn't a question anymore. It was a map. Alan had me sign 3 forms I won't remember by name. Detective King texted to say the video parsed clean. The timestamps matched. The audio was unambiguous. The ADA followed with 2 sentences. Stay boring. If he provokes, decline to be interesting. I took that as my religion until dinner. Mark called at 5:30. I let it go once, and then answered, because the one thing you can't do with men like him is leave them alone with their narrative. You satisfied? He asked, his voice calm in that way a lake is calm when the current beneath is doing calculus. You managed to embarrass us in front of a judge. I managed to keep a boy out of the cold, I said. You managed to turn a family disagreement into a police matter, he pressed. You think you won? You didn't. You set a timer. The sentence made me catch my breath. How a man reveals himself with his own metaphors. Shoo, don't put the boy back in any room without heat, I said. I'm not doing this for sport. He laughed, a sound with nothing soft in it. You never did anything that wasn't a performance. Dad, enjoy your spotlight. I'll see you Sunday. Sunday? I asked, though I already knew. CPS supervised visitation. He hung up without answering. Men like him loved nothing more than a line without a period. Night came the way winter nights come on Elm Rest. One light at a time, one furnace at a time, one dog bark fed to another and sent down the block like a chain of custody. I made spaghetti because it was a shape Evan understood even on days he didn't understand the rest. He twirled noodles and told me about a science project he wants to build. A rubber band car. Oh, you wind it, he said, eyes bright. And then it goes. Careful with rubber bands, I said, and we both laughed at the coincidence nobody asked for. At 7:00 p.m., there was a knock. Not the doorbell. This was too polite. The rap of someone who doesn't know the camera or who wants to pretend he doesn't. I opened to Kara standing with her purse hugged close and a face that looked like a person who just found a mirror that refuses to lie. Can I come in? She asked. I looked at the clock, at the boy, at the protective order by the magnets. You can, I said. For 10 minutes, with the door open. She stepped into the hall light and let the air find her. I brought this, she said, pulling a spiral notebook from her bag. It was the kind children use when they're made to practice good habits until the paper is done with them. She thumbed to a page in the middle. He wrote this after one of the nights. I didn't know what to do with it. I copied it when he was at school. I'm sorry it took me this long. The page was wide-ruled blue with a red margin like a boundary the words were good at ignoring. In Evan's careful, school-taught hand was a paragraph. Cold makes me better because it cleans the part of me that thinks I am important. Cold is my friend because it teaches me quiet. If I am still enough, the cold will like me and go away. I read it twice because I couldn't believe a child had been fed these sentences and not choked. The first shock of the protocol had been anger. This was grief, the kind that sees the shape of the harm. Evan came to my elbow without being called. He looked at the page and then at his mother's hands on her purse. Mom, he said, not unkindly, you can't make me write that again. Kara put one hand over her mouth as if the words could be gathered back in time. The other hand shook. I know, she said. Your father said. She stopped. When she spoke again, she was hunting for the present tense like a life raft. I don't know why I listened. I'm listening now. Listening means paper, I said. Not to be cruel, but because the day had taught me the only language that lets sinners back through the door. You'll talk to the detective. You'll talk to CPS and say, "This wasn't a one-time mistake." You'll say it out loud, even if you don't like how it tastes. She nodded, tears that looked less like a performance and more like a dam that finally resigned. "And you'll keep Mark from trying to come take him tonight?" I added. Her laugh was a caught breath, not a sound. "I don't keep Mark," she said, honest in a way I hadn't heard. "But I won't help him." She looked at Evan for permission, and then leaned down and kissed the top of his head like someone handing a thing back to the person it belongs to. "I'm sorry," she said into his hair. "Okay," he answered, which is how children pronounce both absolution and "we will see." She left with her shoulders not higher but straighter. The door stayed open until the night itself felt better about it. I texted Detective King a photo of the notebook page with Kara's permission stamped across the bottom in a message. "You can have it." The detective answered like a person who keeps her phone on for the right reasons. "Got it. Thank you. This matters." When the house settled, I sat with the protocol and the notebook page and the laminated sin of it, and I saw the thing the day wanted me to see. This wasn't greed using cold as a stick. This was a man who wanted to train a child to stop being a person and start being a mirror. The money was a symptom. The cold was the plan. Midpoint is a word writers use. In life, it's the moment when the path you thought you were on turns under your feet and points at the hard hill instead of the scenic overlook. I stopped thinking about not failing, about doing enough for tonight. I started thinking like a man who will take a hill. I called Alan. "We need to seek a no-contact order for Mark if there's any violation," I said. "And we need to be ready for him to try something before Sunday, because the minute he reads the order's fine print, it'll itch." "Already drafted," Alan said, and I could hear his pen knocking a steady tempo against the desk. "Tomorrow we file the longer petition. Tonight you sleep in the chair and keep the recorder on the table within reach, in case the doorbell decides to be dramatic." "I like when you talk home security," I said. "Then you'll love this," he replied. "I asked a friend at the bank to flag any attempts to open products in your name this week. Won't stop it. We'll slow it. Your son likes pressure. We'll remove the timeline. Bless the men who slow things," I said. We hung up. At 9:00 p.m., the doorbell camera showed a car paused 2 houses down. It idled, reconsidered, then drove on. Maybe coincidence. Maybe the universe rehearsing. I wrote it in the notebook anyway. 9:04. Dark sedan. Paused. Moved on. One day, even the harmless details earned their keep. Evan fell asleep as if his body understood more than his mind. The kind of tired that comes when your organism decides it's safe enough to power down. I moved the blanket to his chin and stood in the doorway to the hall. The sewing room door was still locked. The porch light still burned. I thought of the ledger and the sentence about cold being a friend and felt the smallest, fiercest thank you for paper. It had saved my life more than once. Schematics, measurements, a recipe Ellen wrote in pencil for the stew that could cure a Tuesday. Now it would save a boy. The judge's paper, the deputy's paper, the doctor's paper, the protocol itself. Damning because a man who worships control can't resist an outline. The house took a breath. So did I. Somewhere outside, the train spoke its iron language and counted the blocks between us. Inside, my phone buzzed once more. "Detective King. Reminder. If anything tonight feels off, call me before you decide you're old enough to handle it alone." I texted back, "Copy." Then, because a man can learn new tricks even in his 70s, I added, Thank you, she wrote. You're doing the job. So, I did it. I sat. I kept the chair. I let the night pass through the vents and not through a child's bones. And when the clock in the hall argued with itself about whether it was 10, 30, or 11, 0, I stopped listening for once to anything but the breath from the couch and the simple math of it. 1 in, 1 out, and the knowledge that the worst of the day had been named and would not, if I could help it, be allowed to keep its shape. By Saturday, the paper was doing its job. The protective order hung inside the hall closet like a small flag that meant, in plain language, keep the boy warm and do not improvise. The house learned the new routine fast. Breakfast, notes in the notebook, a walk around the block with our collars up, a check of the doorbell camera like a sailor checks the horizon. At noon, the bank called. Alan's quiet favor paying dividends. Mr. Vance, the manager said, her voice built entirely of decorum. We received an application for a line of credit in your name submitted online at 11:06 a.m. The answers to our security questions were creative. We declined and have placed a hold on new applications for 72 hours. You will receive a letter. You could hear in the careful grammar the part she could not say. Someone is trying to shake money out of you. And we put our hand over the donation box. Thank you, I said, and wrote the time in the notebook and handed the pen to Evan so he could circle it in red. He took the job very seriously and then asked if we could make grilled cheese. We were washing the pan when Detective King texted, CPS interviews complete. Sunday 2 p.m. supervised at our center. Father unhappy. Mother less so. Keep your bell on. I didn't know whether she meant the doorbell or the sense God gives you. Either way, I set both to loud. Late afternoon stormed in on a wind that tested the old windows for stories. The sky went the color of tin. The maple in Mrs. Jewel Ruiz's yard showed the pale undersides of its leaves, small warning flags from a previous century. By 5:00 p.m., the streetlights blinked on in unison. By 5:10 p.m., the power hiccuped once, twice, then caught itself like a man tripping and pretending he meant to dance. Do we need candles? Evan asked, already halfway to the drawer where Ellen used to keep the birthday tapers and the emergency reel ones. We need readiness, I said, which is candles that can find the matches without doing a comedy. We set a small platoon on the table and one on the new post. We ate early on purpose, soup again, a reheated promise, and washed dishes with the radio mumbling about gusts and scattered outages. At 7:19 p.m., the heat clicked off. The first thing you notice when a furnace surrenders is the absence. The second is the way the house remembers how to be cold. I checked the breaker. Fine. Thermostat still pleading with an empty vent. Then the doorbell camera pinged with the small, insistent sound of bad timing. I opened the app and saw the side yard view I didn't know I needed until I had it. A figure at the gas meter crouched in the posture of a man, telling himself he is being clever. Hood up, gloves on. But posture is a signature, and I've known his since before he could spell his name. Get your coat, I said to the boy, voice level. Boots, hat. We're going to Mrs. Ruiz's. He didn't argue. He pulled on readiness the way he pulled on the fleece. I texted King and Allen with thumbs I kept steady through the sheer force of stubbornness. Gas meter tampering. Furnace down. Leaving for neighbors. Camera recording. Then, because a man can learn, I tapped the side button. 911. River County doesn't make you introduce yourself twice. Stay inside, the dispatcher said. Deputies are on their way. Are you safe to exit with the child? I will be if I leave now, I said. He has a history of blocking doors. Then go now, she said. Stay on the line. We went out the back instead of the front, because a long life teaches you the value of an exit that isn't the obvious one. The alley held its breath. The wind knifed down from nowhere and everywhere. I tucked Evan under my arm and kept the duffel strap across my chest, like a sash a braver man might deserve. We made the gate. We were halfway to the Ruiz porch when a car nose appeared at the mouth of the alley. Dark, idling, like a thought someone didn't want to admit to. Headlights flared and then dipped. The engine crept forward with the entitlement of a person convinced the world is his hallway. Back, I said, pivoting us into the shadow of Mrs. Ho Ruiz's hedge. The car paused at my shed, as if it had been told to stop there in a previous version of the story. The passenger door opened. A man I didn't know got out, stocky in a way that made me think of hired help, the kind Mark would swear was a friend if asked under oath. He looked down the alley, up, then tapped the roof twice. The driver's door opened. Mark. He wore no coat. He wore purpose like a heating element. He had something in his hand. Not a weapon. Not quite. More like a wrench with opinions. He went to my gas meter and crouched where he'd crouched before. The camera caught him as if it had studied for a test. Ray, the dispatcher said in my ear. Deputy 2 minutes out. Copy, I said. I have never wanted more to be 20 and invisible. Instead, I was my age and evident, with a boy's breath fogging at my side in small, brave clouds. Grandpa, Evan whispered into the fleece. My chest is okay. I just want you to know. I do know, I said. Keep it okay. We waited while the car's exhaust wrote nonsense in the cold. When Mark and his help finished their sabotage and turned to go back to the street, we cut across the lawn and took the Ruiz steps 2 at a time. The door opened before we knocked. Some neighbors are part of your skeleton. Mrs. Ruiz made a space with her body and a shape with her arms that said in clear grammar, Get in. The warmth hit like light. I smelled stew and pledge and a small dog protesting the existence of my boots. In, she said again, and only then looked over my shoulder past the hedge. He brought company. Company is unwelcome, I said. Deputy is invited. She nodded like a general on a comfortable salary. Sit. I'll call my grandson to hook the camera to the TV. She handed Evan a mug. Hot chocolate. Doctor's orders. The boy looked at me. Doctor's orders. I confirmed, because sometimes it helps to hear the law say yes. We watched our own side yard on Mrs. Ruiz's television, while our own house across the way grew colder on purpose. Mark and the other man came up the walk and tried my front door with the breezy confidence of people who believe doors owe them. They knocked. They rang. The new camera's speaker recorded Mark's voice with the fidelity of a confession booth. Dad, he called. I know you're in there. Your heat's out. You shouldn't keep Evan in a cold house. Let me take him. We'll get warm. Mrs. Ruiz's grandson used the remote like a surgeon. Listen, he murmured, boosting the audio. I'm recording, my doorbell said in its cherubic robot voice. Mark stepped back and looked straight into the lens, as if he'd decided to argue with it. Dad, he said again, precise now, salesman direct. It's unsafe. Be reasonable. Sirens arrived from 2 different directions. Blue light throwing honest geometry down Elmrest. Deputy Harris's cruiser slid into the gap at my curb like a puzzle piece. Another unit parked at the corner. Harris stepped out, hat on, posture that makes the foolish remember algebra. Evening, he said, which is what he says when evening is what it isn't. Trouble with your furnace? My father's having an episode, Mark said smoothly, pointing to the house that was currently doing its forced impression of an icebox. He took my son and now won't answer the door, Mark insisted, his voice a flawless imitation of a concerned family man. We smelled gas. He lied, the fabrication smooth on his tongue. We came to get the boy to a warm place. Harris glanced at the gas meter like a man noticing the punchline before the joke, his eyes sweeping across the connection. Smelled gas from the alley. Did you, Mark? He asked, his tone gentle, utterly without accusation, which made it all the more chilling. Harris bent, not touching the meter, just looking, his gaze forensic, and asked, "What's that with the shutoff? Looks fresh." The second deputy, meanwhile, took a position not far from the passenger door of the dark car and had the quiet idea to shine a light into it, a sudden flash of reality that settled the facts. The passenger, Mark's friend, decided to produce identification so quickly it looked like a reflex, and that instantly solved the question of whether he was a friend or a person who brings his own name to a problem. "Sir," Harris said to Mark, his voice soft as an usher's, "step over here with me," and he angled them both toward my doorbell camera, because experience teaches you that devices deserve a front-row seat to the truth. Mark tried to pivot. "You're under a protective order at the moment to keep the boy safe," Mark said, desperately clinging to a half-truth he could spin. "Exactly," Harris agreed. "Right now, the boy is with a safe caregiver, and that caregiver reported tampering with a gas meter." "Reported?" Mark repeated, his head cocked to the side like a person trying to make a word confess. He's confused. He thinks he sees what he wants to see. Harris did not look at the lens. He let the lens look at him. "You just told me you smelled gas," he said, "and here we are. Let's stay on one channel." A new set of headlights painted the hedges, not police blue, but the sober white of an unmarked car, and Detective King stepped out, wearing a wool coat that looked like authority bought it on sale. She showed her badge with the ease of someone who's had to show it to men who enjoy not believing in badges. "Evening," she said to Harris, then to Mark. "We all chose a cold night to be theatrical." "Detective," Mark said, turning the word into a compliment he could weaponize later. "My son is inside a freezing house. I need to get him to warmth. Is that a crime?" "It's not a crime to care," King said, her voice dry as aged paper. "It's a crime to engineer the need for your care by shutting off your father's gas." She tilted her head toward my camera, a small encouragement to Mark to smile, and he almost did. Then he didn't. "Do you have proof?" "Doorbell video," she said. "2 angles, 1 neighbor video, plus the protective order, plus River County's patience, which you have misjudged." He recovered that salesman poise. "I called 911. He said, 'You're welcome.'" "So did the grandfather," King countered. "He did it from somewhere warm with the child. He did not bring a friend to help him wrestle utility fittings." She looked at Harris. "I'd like you to place him in cuffs for violating the order and for tampering. We'll let the county attorney sort the rest." Mark put up one hand, palm out, not quite surrender. "This is an overreaction you people are making." The rest of the sentence fell apart under the small, unremarkable sound of handcuffs doing a job they didn't invent, but perform with unarguable grammar. The second deputy eased the friend against the car with the tenderness professionals save for dangerous tasks, and the friend found his manners just in time. Mrs. Mo Ruiz made a soft noise that was not triumph and not relief exactly, more like a prayer that had finally learned how to stand. Evan took one long breath, his chest lifting under the fleece, and let it out without a squeak. "Warm enough?" I asked. Warm because, he said, not finishing the sentence because he didn't have to. King phoned the gas company, and in 20 minutes, a man in a jacket that said what he was knelt at my meter and made the world right in a few practiced turns. Whoever fiddled with this knew enough to be annoying, he said, not enough to be safe. He turned the furnace back on, hovered to be sure it caught, and wrote his report like he'd been taught penmanship by a man who believed cursive could save democracy. Harris walked across to Mrs. Mo Ruiz's and knocked, though we'd left the door open for him. He stepped into the warmth and took his hat off to be polite to a room that deserved it. He's in custody, he said. It won't solve the week, but it will make the next few hours less interesting. Boring is my new religion, I said. Keep practicing, he said. Detective King is calling the ADA. You'll likely have a late-night chat. The call came while the furnace pushed new coins of heat through the vents. Ada Stone, crisp, not unkind. We're booking him on violation of a protective order and tampering with a utility. The video is helpful. The timing is helpful. The part where he argued with the doorbell is more helpful than he imagines. For now, you stay put. Do not engage if he posts bail and tries to communicate. We'll add that to the list. List is getting long, I said. That's what lists do when they're honest, she answered. Try to sleep. We walked home under stars that had decided the storm was no longer entertaining. Inside, the house sighed, grateful to be a house again, and not an unkind experiment. The vents whispered back into corners they'd abandoned an hour before. Evan stood by one and put his hands over it like a camper at a fire. Hello, he said to the warm air, and in that moment, the entire point of living past 70 became obvious. I checked the camera footage again because paper and pixels are the sands I've learned to build on. I saved the files with names that would mean something to a tired man in the morning. Meter 7, 19 p.m. Porch, 7, 26 p.m. Arrest, 7, 33 p.m. I copied them to the toothpick and wrote the exact time I did so in the notebook, like an apprentice trying to impress a hard-nosed foreman. Evan brushed his teeth, inhaler on the sink like a talisman, and chose the couch voluntarily. He said the upstairs felt too far from the vent tonight. I tucked the wool blanket around him and tucked something else under the edges while I was at it. The idea that men can do something other than harm. It's a kind of origami. That tuck, it looks like bedding and is really a vow. The doorbell pinged one more time, a ghost of habit. So I looked. Not Mark. Kara. She stood at the sidewalk talking to Detective King, hands out of her pockets, face naked. King listened, the kind of listening that is half paperwork and half priesthood. She took the spiral notebook page Kara had brought last night and asked her if she'd be willing to say out loud what she'd been saying in ink. Kara nodded, and I watched her sign her name on the detective's clipboard like a person making covenant with the version of herself that can face a mirror. We slept in shifts. Evan easily, me in the chair, the furnace humming confession under the floorboards. At 2:00 a.m., my heart did its small, wild thing and then remembered the cardiologist's numbers. In for 4, out for 6. I breathed the math and it worked, as math sometimes does when feelings can't. I checked the porch a last time. Empty street, blue light gone, just the fat domestic glow of the lamp Mrs. Mo Ruiz keeps on late for anybody's sake. Sometime before dawn, I dreamed about a ship in a bottle. In the dream, someone had dissolved the glue at the neck, and the ship slid out. Not grandly, not like a parade, just gently, as if it had always been the right size for real water. When morning found us, it arrived without drama. The crisis had spent itself against people who turned out in the end to be mildly heroic at the very boring act of keeping a child warm. The climax was not a speech in a courtroom or a punch. It was a door that did not open to the wrong hands, and a furnace that resumed its small domestic song. If you're lucky, the big moments wear small clothes. I wrote the last line of the night in the notebook with the kind of care reserved for things that have earned it. 2:41 a.m. Heat steady, boy asleep, house intact. We bent and did not break. Tomorrow there would be Sunday and supervised visitation and faces that would try to rehearse themselves back into innocence. Tomorrow we would bring our paper and our patience and the little orange inhaler and the memory of a doorbell that learned to tell the truth. Tonight, no. Now that the dark had begun to thin, there was a quiet kitchen and bread to be toasted and a boy who would wake to say toast like it was a password. And I would answer toast because it was. Sunday opened like a fist unclenching. The storm had walked itself off in the night, leaving the street bright and scrubbed and the kind of cold that minds its manners. The furnace made its small domestic hymn under the floorboards. I wrote the first line of the day in the notebook, because habits become railings when the stairs are steep. 7:06. Boy wakes warm, breathing easy, asks for toast. Toast, Evan said from the couch, his hair flattened on one side and wild on the other, a boy halfway between shipwreck and parade. Toast, I answered, because we had earned the right to keep some things simple. He ate in the absorbed way of someone building a foundation one bite at a time. Between slices, he assembled the rubber band car he'd been dreaming about, the kit Mrs. Zabo Ruiz's grandson had loaned him, tucked into the tamale bag like contraband. He wound the axle, set the toy on the floor, and let it go. It skittered across the rug and bumped the baseboard with a sound too small to be victory, and somehow exactly that. Better rubber bands, he announced. These are tired. We'll buy new, I said. Rubber bands are for going, not for chests. He grinned the quick grin children get when their world begins to agree with them. Alan called at 9. Varsho a.m. CPS confirmed 2. Varsu p.m. at the center on Oak Ridge. He said, I'll meet you there with a folder and my least theatrical tie. Ada Stone may swing by. Detective King will be on call. On call? I repeated, tasting the phrase. It felt like a hand on a shoulder from a room away. And Ray, he added, his voice lowering into the gear that moves men toward a thing they don't want to do. Mark posted bail at 3 a.m. The order still holds. The tampering charge sticks to him like burrs, but he'll be there at 2. Unless someone smarter than he is talks him out of it. Then we'll be there at 2 with our paper, I said, and with the boy's coat zipped. We packed deliberately. Inhaler, 2 mandarins. The notebook, front page now a minor topography of underlines. Protective order, discharge instructions, the deputy's notice, a copy of the winter compliance protocol that I slipped into a plastic sleeve of my own, like a message in a bottle I was willing to show anybody. The toothpick went into my shirt pocket. I caught my reflection in the hall mirror and saw a man dressed like a file cabinet. There are worse uniforms. At noon, Dr. Morrison texted, checking in. If anything feels off at visitation, you can end it. You are authorized caregiver. He amended it with the kind of sentence most doctors only remember to send when they've decided medicine includes small acts of heroism. Proud of you both. At 1:30 p.m., Mrs. Ruiz knocked with 2 things wrapped in tissue. A new pair of wool socks and a photo of Evan in her grandson's outgrown coat, snapped on the porch, because she knows evidence wears many faces, in case anyone forgets what a warm child looks like, she said. You show them this. The CPS Center on Oak Ridge had tried to look less like a government building and more like a school library. Murals of storybook animals did their best to supervise the lobby. A woman with a clipboard smiled with her whole face and said, "I'm Lana," in a voice that had practice at making hard days sit down and drink water. She gave Evan a badge with his first name only, and me a badge that said caregiver and felt, because a lanyard can do this, like an oath. Alan arrived in a coat that had too many pockets for the amount of paper he carried. He squeezed my shoulder. "How's the ship?" he asked. The private shorthand we'd built around bottles and glue and the business of getting a boy back to water. "Wants to sail," I said. "Has an engine now. A rubber band." Lana led us to a room with 2 couches and a low table and a one-way window you stop noticing after your 3rd breath if you want to live. "We keep visits short at first," she said. "We end them shorter if the child asks. You don't have to be brave for anyone in this building. Brave is for the car ride home." Kara arrived first, alone. Her purse looked lighter by a pound, as if she'd taken a few stones out of it. "May I hug him?" she asked Lana. Not me, and that was new. "You can ask him," Lana said. "He gets to answer." Evan stepped forward and let her hug him for exactly the time he wanted and no more. When she let go, she looked at him the way you look at weather from a safe porch. Respectful, a little frightened of the power. "I talked to the detective," she said. "I told her about the notebook. I told her about the timers. I told him to stop and then I didn't make him." Evan nodded, as if cataloging her verbs. "Okay," he said, the exact syllable for a ledger that has begun to balance. Mark arrived on the dot of 2 with a lawyer I didn't know, and the kind of calm that reads like a man measuring a new room for furniture he may or may not own. He took the chair opposite Evan and leaned forward, elbows on knees, charm dialed to 3 to sell sincerity instead of a car. "Hey, buddy," he said. "I missed you." "Hi," Evan said. He didn't sit back. He didn't lean forward. He found the geometry half my life took me to learn. Mark looked at me and Alan and the window he knew was a window and decided to perform for all 3. "We made some mistakes," he said to the air as much as to his son. "We were strict when we should have been patient. Your grandfather has always hated my discipline. That's fine. I'm willing to be coached. We can do therapy. We can do whatever the court wants. Let's not turn this into a circus." "Good," Lana said toward the room from the small chair near the door where supervisors sit. "We like therapy. We like clear, boring, safe." Evan's hands found each other, fingers lacing, a move I have seen on men testifying before men who can stamp paper. "No more garage," he said, looking not at his father, but at the space rough statements go to get polished. "And no timers. And if I say I want to stop talking, we stop." Kara nodded so hard the word almost fell off her neck. "Yes." Mark lifted one palm. "Of course," he said. His face did what faces do when people decide to adopt the rules for the hour and not a minute longer. "We all want what's best." "Good." Lana repeated the syllable a bench. "We're at 15 minutes. We'll do 10 more if everyone's comfortable." They talked about small things. A science project, rubber bands, propulsion, a teacher who wears ties with planets on them, a dog from down the block that barks at leaves. Mark's smile belonged better to these subjects. When he aimed at larger ones, return dates, who picks up from school. Lana shook her head, gentle. "Not today," she said. "Today is for remembering how to talk." At 21 minutes, Evan looked at me and then at Lana. "I'm done," he said without apology. "Visit complete," Lana said, writing the words the way people write things that count twice. Once now, once later. Kara squeezed his hand with the humility that comes from a lesson too late and maybe still in time. Mark stood, rearranged his coat into a man, and said to me, "You got your show like a person giving away a trophy he thinks you stole." "Sunday at 2 again next week," Lana said from the door. Same rules. Less talking, more listening. In the lobby, Detective King materialized the way people do who've learned how to be everywhere without being the point. She nodded at me, at Alan, at the boy. "Gentlemen," she said. "Ma'am." Her phone buzzed, and she glanced, and then looked up, business clicking into gear. "Ada Stone asked me to relay arraignment tomorrow on the tampering and order violation. Don't go to the courthouse unless you want to be entertained for the wrong reasons. We've requested a condition. No contact outside supervised visitation. Expect noise. Treat it like weather." "What about his attempt at a line of credit?" I asked. King tilted her head toward Alan. "Your counsel's already filed the fraud alerts. We opened an incident to attach to the tampering file." Slow is still speed. Alan smiled in the dry way. "Only a man who has slept 3 hours and eaten 2 crackers can." "We like slow," he said. "We like the kind of slow that arrives before something else. Back home, we kept being dull on purpose. I showed Evan the small bedroom that had been Ellen's sewing room, and then a museum of things I wasn't ready to take to the thrift store. We cleared it together carefully, like the kind of excavation archaeologists write articles about. The quilting hoop went back to the closet, the old machine onto a shelf where it could look over his shoulder without making him feel watched. We set up a narrow bed with sheets that still smelled faintly of the cedar chest. He put the rubber band car on the dresser like a mascot. "Is this my room?" he asked in the voice you use when you're trying not to make a word too heavy and failing. "It's your room," I said, "as long as the people with stamps and seals say so. And after that, if you want it." He tested the mattress with a slow sit, then lay back and stared at the ceiling. "It looks different than your living room ceiling," he observed. "Every room makes its own map out of cracks," I said. "You'll learn this one by heart, and then we'll patch the biggest line together so it knows who's boss." Dinner was spaghetti again because routine tastes like safety. We set an extra place out of habit, and then put the plate back because habit needs coaching. Mrs. Ruiz sent over a slice of cake with a note that said simply, "For the court of public opinion, bite this," which is a joke a good neighbor gets to make after she opens her door at the right minutes of a life. At 8:10 p.m., we packed his backpack for school. We added the inhaler with a label. We tucked in a letter from the CPS caseworker to the school. We put the photograph of Evan in the warm coat in an envelope with Ms. Lockwood's name because we are building an ecosystem, not a moment. He brushed his teeth in the new bathroom, his bathroom by adjacency, and asked, mouth full of mint, "Do I still get consequences?" "Yep," I said, relief surprising me with its friendliness. Consequences like, "You can't leave your socks in the hallway because I can and will trip." Consequences like, "If you roll your eyes at me, I'm obligated to say try again with your face." Consequences like, "You aren't rude to Mrs. Ruiz or to yourself." He spit, thought, and nodded as if the laws of the new country made a kind of sense. Before bed, I took the notebook and wrote in slow block letters on a blank page, "Safety plan." Then I made 2 lists in the calm language of a man who's measured things for a living. Warmth is not a privilege. If you say stop, we stop. If your chest is tight, we use the inhaler. Then we tell someone whose job it is to help. My door stays open. The porch camera records boring things unless something interesting tries to happen, in which case it records interesting things. I showed him the list. He took the pen and added a 6th item with the concentration of a small engineer. No timers. He underlined it once, then twice. Approved, I said, initialing the bottom like it was a blueprint that would become a house. Alan called at 9:00 p.m. to say the bank had confirmed the freeze all the way around my name, and that a credit monitoring service would now bark if a squirrel so much as looked at my file. It'll settle, he said. Give it 3 weeks in a court calendar. What about 3 years and a life? I asked softly. He was quiet long enough for the furnace to remind me it existed. That part you're already doing, he said. I don't bill for it. After we hung up, I did the last rounds. Front lock, back lock, porch light, camera's small, unblinking eye. I stopped at the hall closet where the protective order hung behind magnets that said Yellowstone and Paris, and thought about the trips we never took, and the one we were taking now, whether we'd planned it or not. The doorbell pinged once at 10:00 p.m. I checked the feed with a pulse that behaved. It was only Detective King walking Mrs. Ruiz's little dog past our hedge and pretending to read a text, which is the kind of presence that feels like a benediction more than surveillance. She looked up once at the camera and tipped an imaginary hat. I waved like a man in an old movie who has decided to live. Sleep came to Evan as if someone had turned a key. He went down in the new bed and did not stir, his face open in the unguarded way faces go when they've learned for a few hours at least to trust their pillow. I sat in the chair one last time because it felt superstitious not to, and because the chair has learned the shape of every version of me. The man who thought he could manage this with charm, the man who wanted to shout at winter, the man who learned to let paper do his yelling. I opened the notebook to the first page and the last and measured the distance we'd walked in pen strokes. It wasn't a book yet. It was a bridge. I underlined the day's final entry. 9:37 p.m. Boy asleep in his own room. Furnace steady. Consequences redefined. On Monday, there would be arraignment without us and small, sensible storms over paperwork and longer, quieter weather in a therapist's office where a rubber band car might sit on the shelf until a boy needed it for a metaphor. On Wednesday, Ms. Lockwood would text a photo of Evan presenting his science project to a classroom of third graders who clap like rain on a roof. On Friday, I would show him how to oil the door hinges so the cold can't sneak in, pretending to be a squeak. A month from now, perhaps, the judge would extend the guardianship while everyone learned the new grammar. A year from now, the future refuses planning, but sometimes allows a hope. We would still be making toast. For now, the house hummed, and the window panes held, and the radiator gave off the sort of heat that makes a man forgive it for humming. At 2:00 a.m., the porch light cast a tidy coin on the stoop where men with official hats had stood, and no one stood there now. My phone, face down on the end table, stayed quiet in a way that made me want to pat it like a tired animal. I breathed in for 4, out for 6, cardiologist approved, prayer adjacent. Sometime near dawn, a train stitched its iron sentence across the edge of town. I listened and counted and then didn't. The kettle began to think about whistling. The day would be full of things I could do and things I could not. The difference no longer scared me. Footsteps padded down the hall. Evan stood in the doorway, fleece zipped, socks his size for once. He looked at the ceiling as if checking his map, then at me. "Toast," he said. "Toast," I answered. And the word meant an old man's kitchen, and a judge's order, and a deputy's hat, and a neighbor's steady heart, and a doctor who texts back, and a lawyer who believes in crackers, and a detective who walks a small dog under cold stars, and also, amazingly sufficiently, it meant bread. He sat. I buttered. The furnace sang. Beyond the glass, Elmrest woke itself up one house at a time. It would be spring soon, and then not, and then again. We would keep the boy warm each time, not with speeches or timers or schemes, but with the boring, reliable machinery of kindness and consequences that don't confuse hazard with love. After breakfast, we wound the rubber band car together and watched it go. It ran straight and true and hit the baseboard with a click, like a punctuation mark that knows what it's doing. We laughed louder than the moment required, because the morning permitted it. Later, I would print out today's entries and put them in the binder behind a tab that said, Safety Plan. And maybe one day Evan would roll his eyes properly with consequences and tell me I was old-fashioned, and I would say, Try again with your face. And he would laugh and fix it, and the furnace would still be humming. For now there was only this: a warm room, a boy breathing, the clink of a plate on a table, and the small handshake between a promise and the day. The ship, freed of its bottle, didn't need a speech to know the direction of water. It needed breakfast and a hand at its stern, and the knowledge, simple, hard one, that home, properly maintained, is a place where winter comes to the door and finds it politely, permanently closed. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.